Hi, this is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. And with Easter right around the corner, here's a little chick that we can make on the knitting machine with the ribber. This one's made on the bulky machine. So for starters, you're going to need some yarn for the chick. I used up all this paler yellow on prototypes, so I went and got some of this brighter yellow. It's a group 4 acrylic yarn. You also need very small amounts of some black and some orange for the little beak. So let's get started on this. For the needle arrangement, I'm going to do every other needle on the main bed from number 21 on the left over to number 22 on the right. Then on the ribber, I'm going to do the in-between needles. So on the ribber, I'm just pushing those out to go with the main bed. I have it in full pitch, and it's every other needle. My carriage is on the left, and I've set my carriage to the very tightest tension. I'm going to do the zigzag row. Now my yarn is smooth, and later on I'm going to pull on the zigzag row and gather the bottom of the ribbing. Not something you do often, but just ideal for this chick. Threaded the ribber, and I'm going from left to right. Now I am going to hang the medium comb and 2 weights. Once I've put the comb and weights on, I'm going to change to tension 1 on both beds and to circular knitting. So this right lever up down here and this left part button in. I'm only doing 2 rows circular. So the first row knitted on the ribber only, and the second row knitted on the main bed only. Now I'm going to go ahead and change to 1 by 1 ribs, so cancel the circular. And I'm going to go on to tension 3, and I'm going to knit 5 rows on tension 3. Now I need to change to English rib, and the kind I'm going to do for this is I'm going to have the ribber tuck only going to the right. So set your carriage so it tucks only to the right. And once it's set up for that and up on tension 5, so I've got to loosen both tensions, I'm going to go ahead and knit 22 rows. It will tuck on the ribber only, going to the right, and knit plain going to the left. I've knitted my 22 rows, and what I'm going to do now is bind off 12 stitches at the beginning of each of the next 2 rows. Now my carriage is on the left, so I'm binding off here first, and I start by transferring the stitches to the main bed. So this one is on the main bed, so that's 1, and number 2 is on the ribber. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. All of those stitches need to come up to the corresponding main bed needles. So I'll just do that quickly. I added another weight. This yarn was a little heavier than the yarn I used for the prototypes. So before I can bind off, I needed all the stitches up on the main bed. The next thing I need is for all 12 of those stitches to be bound off. So I'm pulling them out to hold. I'm going to double check there are 12 of them. And I'm going to get the yarn free from the carriages so I'll have it for binding off. Now what I'm going to do is knit these back loosely. They need to be loose to do a loop through a loop bind off. That will give me a really good looking edge on the candy basket part of the chick. And it's not that hard. You see, I'm just putting the yarn in the open latch, and I'm just popping the needle back by pushing on the needle butt. And I'm pushing back a little extra far to get a good loose loop. Now this yarn's going to be in my way as I bind off, so I'm just hooking it over on the right end, and then I'm going to bring these stitches out. The stitches actually back and the needles out, I should be saying, so that I can bind them off. I'm using a latch tool for this bind off, and I hope you can see okay in spite of the needles being in the way. I start by getting a stitch on the latch tool. It's this first one here. I'll lift it up so you can see it. It's on this needle, but I slide that needle back out of the way. And then I lift up the second needle and I get the second stitch on the latch tool so that that second stitch is in the hook and the first stitch is behind the hook. And then I pull a loop through a loop as I push that needle back out of the way. And I'll get this next one. That was just too hard to see, so I have moved the camera around so you can see it better. You see there is a stitch on my latch tool below the latch, and I lift this needle and I get a stitch inside the latch. Then I push the needle back out of the way and pull the new stitch through the old stitch, and I repeat. Get my new stitch in the latch, pull the needle back and push on through, and get the next one, pull the needle back and push on through, in this way I can bind off, and I only have a few more to do, and then there's one more step to this bind off, which really is pretty easy, but you do need to see what to do this last step. Get these last few. Now this right here is the 12th stitch that I've bound off. I push them all out of work. Those needles are out of my way. I'm going to take this loop and put it on the next needle. And then I reach below and I move my weights inward so the weight is actually under the work. Now I had moved the yarn out of my way over on the right, but I'm going to go ahead and rethread it in the carriage so that I can knit a row. I've rethreaded that yarn. It's pretty far from the knitting, so I'm going to pull up on the yarn as I approach and knit the row to the right. Now the next instruction is to bind off 12 on the right hand side. I've moved my camera so you're looking at the right hand end of the work, and I'm going to take 12 off. So that will be these stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. All of those need to go up on the main bed before I can do the bind off. Now, this one looks different than the one on the left looked because there are 2 loops on the needle. These were the tuck stitches. Whenever I went to the right, my machine did tuck stitches on the river. So, moving those over to the main bed, just using my double-eyed tool. Now I want to bind off the 12 stitches. I can't do that till I've got them on the main bed and I've knitted through them loosely. So let's get those pushed out. 3, 6, 9, 12. I'm going to unthread the carriage and knit through those loosely. So here we go, just pushing the needle back and making a good long loop as I do it. even though this is a quick and small little project, you still get to try some new things, including this binding up ribbing at the beginning of a row, which is very often a useful thing to do. I'm just going to hook that yarn on the left so it won't be in my way while I do the bind off, and I'm going to push those 12 needles to be bound off out. So that's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. These get bound off and the last one goes on that needle. So here I am with my latch tool. This is just what I did on the other side. I get that first loop in the latch tool and I push the needle back out of the way. Then I go get that second loop on the latch tool so that the first loop's below the latch and the second loop is in the hook. Push the needle out and give it a little tug. Now let's get this third one. It is helpful to lift the needle up to get inside that loop. And hey, it's not hard. The one thing you want to do is not get anything hooked on these gate pegs. These gate pegs can be a problem if you get the yarn stuck on them. Oh, and if that happens, you've got to fiddle and get that yarn in that hook, not below the latch. Try again. There, get it in the hook. Now this is really just like the other side. When I get this last one hooked and looped on through, oh, let me get that. It really does help to lift up. Then I put it on the next needle. So there's 2 loops on that end needle and 11 have been bound off. I make sure they're all pushed all the way back so they don't give me any trouble. A needle that's out is a needle that the machine will knit onto. It'll lay yarn right into that needle. Now I've got way too much weight on, so I'm adjusting my weight. It is now time for the head of the chick. I don't change any of my setting. I'm just going to go ahead and do 20 rows of English rib for the chick's head. To finish my chicken's head, I'm just going to cancel the tuck. So instead of English rib, I will just have ordinary ribbing. And I'm going to knit 4 rows, and I'm going to reduce the tension each row by 1 whole number. So let's do a row on tension 4, and then we'll do a row on tension 3, and then we'll do a row on tension 2, and then we'll do a row on tension 1. Now I'm going to take this off on waste yarn, and I'm going to sew that up for the top of the head later. So to take it off on waste yarn, what I like to do is cut the yarn but leave enough for sewing. A little bit of sewing to do on this chicken head. I have a little bit of this lavender yarn threaded and ready to go for my waste yarn. I'm going to tie the lavender to the yellow. This is a really easy way to change colors and to thread through the machine. I'll just take either the work hook or, because it's handy, my latch tool, go between the beds, grab the yellow, and pull it down. Pull it down until the yellow is all below the machine and the lavender is showing in my carriage. And then I'm going to do waist yarn. I think 4 or 5 or 6 rows would be good. That completes the knitting for the chicken itself. So I'm going to take it off the machine and we'll see what we have. And here is the thing. It has a rather plain side, but then if you flip it over, it has the fancy, bumpy English rib side. So there is a right and a wrong side to the English rib. This is going to be folded this way to make our chicken. And we're going to gather the top, and then we're going to do a little finishing on the chicken otherwise. But before I do the finishing, I need the eyes and the beak. Now I'm going to make the bird beak. I've got some thin orange yarn. I have every other needle for 3 needles out, and my carriage is down on tension 1. I'm back to flatbed knitting. I knit from right to left, and it hooks on those 3 needles, and then I'm going to just take a weight and use it for a comb. I'll bring out the in-between needles. I'm knitting 8 rows. And then I'm going to sew off. I'll cut the yarn. I'll thread it on a needle. Because it's handy, I'm going to use my double eye tool. And whenever you see that instruction to sew off, that just means to take the needles off onto a piece of yarn by using a needle. So I'll do that quickly. This funny little object will be the beak. And I pull this yarn on through and tighten it. Then I get the weight off. Because of the kind of cast on I used, if I pull the bottom yarn and tighten it, it closes that. And then with the purl side facing the camera, you can see the thing we have, and that it'll make a cute beak folded like this and sewed on the chicken. I will tighten the top and bottom and then fold it and put it in place. Now we need 2 eyes. You could embroider eyes, but I've got an easy eye that you can make. We're going to bring out every other needle again. We're still down on tension 1. I'm using a thin black yarn. I don't knit much with that black yarn. This is actually 2 strands of a thinner yarn, but it'll work fine. Using what I have, I knit across, I hang the weight, and I put out the in-between needles. I am only knitting 3 rows this time. 1, 2, making sure it knits through, and 3. Again, making sure it knits through. Now I'm going to cut this yarn, and I'm going to sew this off. So once again, I thread a needle. Since I'm using 2 strands, I have to thread them both in that eye. And I put these stitches back on the needles like that and pull the needles out. That makes it easy to sew off. I just pull the stitches off the end of the hooks. Draw that through. Get my weight off. Draw this one up. Now this makes a tiny little bead, and this is going to be our beady little chicken eye, little bitty. It had to be a little bit prominent to show when it's sewn on the chicken. I have to make 2 of these eyes. I'll make the second eye and be right back. Here is the chicken head. It's not sewed yet, and this is the center, and I'm going to put an eyeball here and an eyeball here. This is the right side of the English rib, and I went and got a sharp needle simply because it's easier for me to use. And I'm just going to put this on So I'm going to go 2 stitches down from the top and put that on like that. Then I'm going to get the other string. I'm going to put the other string to the inside of that by a half stitch. And then I'm going to do the other eyeball. So here I went just to the outside of, I went to the middle of this stitch. They need to match, of course. So I'll put that there. And then this inside piece, I can't put them through the same hole. I wouldn't be able to tie them off on the inside. So this inside piece goes a half stitch over right here. Now I can remove my needle from the yarn and flip this over and tie these into place. Strings everywhere. I'm just going to knot them. So tying a knot on that eye, double knot, we want it to stay. If you're doing this for a baby, I think you'd be better off embroidering the eye. You don't want anything that they could possibly chew off and get in their mouth. Let's get this one. Same idea. We'll tie it twice and then give it the snip, and we have eyeballs. I don't hide this black string because it's going on the inside, and the other reason is that it will show. So it'll do better like that. So there's my chicken face again, and we need to install the beak. So here's my beak. Let me get that needle. There's a couple of steps that we don't want to skip. I want the top and the bottom of the beak to stay gathered, so to do that I am sewing back through those stitches again. My yarn is coming from the right here, and I'm going to start on the left and go back through those stitches. That will gather that so it stays tightly, and even so that it is a little bit pointed. And I think I missed a stitch over here. I'll just get it again because I want them to kind of point. There we go. So you see I have sort of a point on that end. Now let's do the same thing to the other end. This was the cast on end. The yarn is coming from here. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to go through those stitches again and tighten it all up because I want it to stay in a little point. So that's my beak shape. Now I'm going to take this yarn and just sort of weave it in and out to get to the middle of the beak. Now I'm going to position my beak. I have the purl side up, and I'm going to fold it and whip it down. So I'm folding it this way in half, just like that, and then I'm going to hold it on the little face and center it and then whip it down into place using this yarn, which probably came unthreaded. I'm using a big needle so you can see, but sometimes these big needles are harder to actually use. So anyway, I'm just doing a whip stitch, getting in there, whatever's close, whip. I'm going to whip all the way across, and I'm taking whatever yarn is behind it to whip into. And yes, I know this will squash the beak flat, but since I'm not joining the points, it will be fine once it's in place. So there we go. That is sewed down like that. See the beak starting to form? And I need to hide that end. So I'm going to bring this around like this and work this end into the orange. And back stitch a couple times and just hide that bit of yarn in there. And that's pretty well sewed on. And then I'm going to clip the yarn. That finished sewing down the top of the beak, but we still have this other piece of yarn. So I'm going to thread that in my needle, and I'm going to work my way down this bit of yarn, just weave in and out, until I'm at the folded part of the beak. And then I'm going to go under the beak with this yarn and flip the beak up this way. And you guessed, I'm going to whip this side down. I'm just whipping it down, taking tiny stitches. And then again, I just need to hide this yarn. Just get rid of this end, sew it on in, so that our little chick still needs some sewing. The first thing I want to do is gather the top of the head. So, remember when I added my waist yarn, I tied it on and pulled it through? I'm going to cut that. And I'll thread the yellow in the needle. This is something that you may not have done, but there's a way to gather one by one ribbing into a circle. What you do is you sew the outside and then the inside. So I'm going in each of these knit loops, being careful not to get the purple, just getting the yellow. You see how I'm getting one loop? I think I split the purple. Let me try and be careful. If I do, it's only the waist yarn. I pull that up, and then I have a few more stitches here on this side. So let me get this one, and this one, and this last knit stitch. So that gathers up that side. Then you're going in this direction, okay? So you go to the inside, and it's not exactly an obvious thing, but what you want to do is you want to go through these, going from left to right also, or if you went right to left, you want to go right to left both times. In other words, there's a loop over here that's going to close when I draw this up. And I just take my time, because if I take off the waist yarn, and I will, then these are open stitches that can unravel. So now they have thread in each one, and I can take off the waist yarn. Oh, here's a little split place in the waist yarn, and I'm giving it, this is the tiniest strand caught. So I gave that a clip, and now I'm going to take this, and it turns the inside into a circle, and then as I keep pulling, it turns the outside into a circle, and I pull that quite tightly. Then I can sew the back of the head. I'm going to put a seam here, down the back of the head. This is going to be a mattress stitch, and it's going to happen one stitch from the edge. So it's pulled up good and tight, and I go over here and I grab a stitch. It's actually the bar between stitches that I grab. So I'm one stitch in from the edge. I go over here, catch the next bar. Then I go over here to this side, catch the next bar. Then go over here to this side, get the next bar. Over here, next bar. Pretty soon you have done all of the ones that were ribbing, and then you start picking up the English rib. And for that I go through both bars. There'll be 2 crossed bars. And after a while I pull it up tight, and you see the top of the head closes into a circle when I pull it up tight. So I'm going to keep sewing this English rib together. Maybe this will help. It's hard to show finishing on camera. It's so easy to pick up the knitting and move it so that it's no longer positioned so that you can see it on the camera. After I do a few stitches, I pull that up, and you see that English rib down the back of the head? That all closes, and we're getting the back of our chicken head. Okay, so there's my chicken head. Once the back of my chicken head is closed, I'm going to flip it inside out just so that I can hide this bit of yarn here in the seam. And then I can clip that yarn, and I'll show you how I do the bottom of the chicken body. After the yarn is hidden here, you can tighten the bottom of the chicken. It can be gathered just by gently, little by little, pulling on the string that was the cast on. This string was the zigzag row, and what I'm doing is I'm taking this slack out of the zigzag row to gather this up. And it will turn into quite a long piece after I've taken all that slack and pulled it out. So I just keep doing that. If you pull too hard, you can break it. It's only yarn, right? So you've got to just go slow and just work it a ½ inch at a time until it's all gathered up. I'm not quite there yet. A little bit more. There we go. And I especially want to gather it here and at these ends. What happens then is it's easy to get an oval out of this. I sew this back seam, but I can also whip this shut, and I end up with my flat bottom on my chicken. Let me show you on the finished chicken. So I sewed the bottom of the chicken, and I put a seam up here, and it just looks absolutely great, and it's nice and flat so the chicken can sit around. Of course I have to hold him because he's full of candy. Don't want to drop candy all over the room. So I do the same thing here, and I'm just going to sew from here to here with a bit of a whip stitch, and then I'll work my thread over and I'll sew up the back of the chicken. With my Easter chick sewn, I just need to hide this last end. I did the back of the chick the same way I did the back of the head, sewing the mattress stitch seam down between the stitches, one stitch from the edge. So here he is, but I like to put just a tiny handful of fiberfill in the head, and then he'll sit pretty flat and you can fill him with candy. So there you go, make yourself an Easter chick.